Okay, welcome again. This is lesson 6 in taking a completed drawing to a finished render. So, the robot looks significantly different now. It's because I went through and found shapes in the line art and basically applied the same principles that we did when we were rendering out these first two face panels here. One that kind of surrounds this eye shape, and then this frame here for what looked to be a grill in the front. And what I wanted to really reinforce is that while this thing may look like a beast when it came to the painting process, it really wasn't. I used many layers, and nothing really has more than 3 or 4 values. I think it's still very apparent where the values change. And that's just fine, you know, simplicity is what we're going for. Again, I'm not trying to do a really rendered airbrush drawing. I want to see the brush strokes. I like seeing the griminess of the brush. And sometimes simple is a little more charming, you know, less is more. And I really believe that, you know, especially when it comes to the shadow areas where you're literally just working with shapes. You know, there's no real surface detail here, but your eye will do the work, you know. You do half the work by defining a shape, and then the viewer will make up the rest. You really don't have to justify every object you're doing with surface detail and tweaking it out. But you know, I want to point out some things, you know. For instance, this top piece, it is literally, again, just a mid-tone value, a highlight that you're seeing on these rims, and then a shadow tone where there might be indentions. And then in this grate here on the side, you know, again, the same shadow tone here is used here. Now, all of these, again, like I was saying, are on their own layers. I've added a couple lights and minor glows, and I'll show you how I did those in a moment. Right, you can see how these layers are working. Let me zoom out so we can see everything. Right. And what's nice about having your layers separate like this, as far as the many elements of this robot head go, is that you can really apply the brightness and contrast tool to any of them. And with our current lighting scheme, we've figured out that bright colors or bright values come forward and dark values are going back. That's not always the case, but with our lighting scheme it is. So if I were to take, let's say, this big square piece here on its own layer and apply the brightness tool to it by darkening it, you see as I bring it down darker, it goes back into space. It's pushed back. As I bring it forward, it comes forward. This is cool when you're working with a client and you want to provide alternatives to the first design you have. It's nice for them to see that you're thinking about alternatives as well. It's good to always provide a lineup of concepts or designs, or color comps, to show that you're thinking beyond just the one possibility. So about those lights, let's say hypothetically I want to add one more to this small recessed circle here. It's another blue light, let's say. I'll sample the blue I got. I'll take the circular marquee tool, just pull a very simple circle shape, and paint it in. Now, as a bright blue circle like that, it's okay, but what's kind of selling this as a light is that glow. So I'm going to take a standard Photoshop brush, labeled here as 19, and I'm going to bring the hardness all the way to 0. This is going to make it a very feathered quality. And right on top of that light, I'm just going to hit it with some very gentle strokes. Like that. And there you have it. It's that simple. I did the same thing with these red lights here. The only thing different about these red lights is that they, again, have 3 values. You can see that here, at the bottom, is the darkest red, the next lightest red, and then the lightest red here at the center. Another cool thing that I added, well, that's cool in my opinion, is some more interest to the basic silhouette of what is in the shadows. Some of these dangling wires, this rib tubing, these are all things that really add another level of interest to a simple shape. And it's not that we're trying to compensate for a simple shape. We like working in simple shapes. It's good to, especially here in the shadows where you really have no detail. But if we can make that shape interesting in any way, we should. So what I've done is I've gone through with an eraser tool and kind of erased out notches here and there. There's actually a cool trick for using this, for making this rib tubing brush, and I'll show you that right now, because I might want to add a couple more of those. I'll take a standard Photoshop brush. In the Shape Dynamics panel, I'm going to turn off the pen pressure control for the size, but I'm going to turn on direction, and in the brush tip shape panel, I'm going to pull the spacing out. Then here in the radius, I'm going to squash the brush and turn it onto its side. Now we'll pull the spacing out a little bit more, and you can see we now have the same effect that you see here in the painting. So if I select a solid black again, I can go in here and add as much of that as I'd like. Make that bigger and try putting one here. And I like that, so I'll leave it. Maybe I'll go back with a standard brush now and kind of put some more wires in between these elements. And I'm doing this to really make things seem as though they relate to one another. This robot is an amalgamation of many different pieces. This next layer of detail that we're doing is what really ties it all together. The arrangement does a pretty good job, but this just pushes it a little bit further. Maybe a couple more small wires here around the bottom. And I'm happy with that. So again, to reiterate, when you're attacking something that's complex and made of many pieces, recognize the individual pieces. Don't be intimidated by how much there is. It's not really a matter of how much there is, it's just how you're going to go about doing it. Everything is time consuming. Everything will take time. You know, it's not the fact that it's going to take time that's your problem. Just make sure that you find a good system that's going to be not only convincing, but will produce the effect you want with the least amount of work. Now, that's not taking a shortcut. The reason I say the least amount of work is because generally when you pull off something successfully with less work, it means that you did it very elegantly and you did it in a very refined way. If you can pull off a piece of this robot with just maybe 3 values and a couple brush strokes, it's probably going to have a lot more appeal and a lot more charm than something that's been run over with the brush over and over again and just looks way too overdone. So that means you got to think about what you're going to put down before you actually do it, which is time worth thinking. It's good to really analyze your process, find the areas of your process that don't lend themselves to simplicity and this sort of less is more principle, and kind of weed them out. Make sure that everything you're putting down serves a purpose. There's nothing, in my opinion, worse than seeing something that is just really overdone. You kind of kill it that way. When you see the simplicity in values and in brushstrokes, a piece still looks like it has a lot of movement in it. It still looks very lively, and that's what I'm trying to do here. So with that said, we'll stop this lesson. This was just a short discussion about how to approach a robot and something that's complex and how values push things back and forth, and silhouettes in the shadows. And in our next lesson, we will address the legs of this robot.